All right, so here is our video about the different influential documents, these pamphlets, these books, these essays that influenced the American colonists leading up to the American Revolution and in the creation of our Constitution. So we said the first one was the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta is basically the first constitution truly in the world. What it did was it took the power of the king, which up until this point had essentially been unlimited, and it shrunk the power just a little bit. It made the king's power a little bit smaller by forcing the king to share power with a parliament. Now, the parliament was not in any way elected by citizens. It was just a group of rich people, basically. But they were able to take a little bit of power away from the king and force the king to share power. And we said the significance of this is pretty obvious. It goes from having a king who is an absolute monarch, where they have all of the power, shrinking the power just a little bit, still pretty powerful, but forcing the king now into a limited monarchy. And the Magna Carta did that. It's the first attempt to really limit the power of the king. So that's the Magna Carta. The next attempt to limit the power of the king, a successful attempt, was something called the English Bill of Rights. So if the Magna Carta is like our Constitution, the English Bill of Rights is a bit like our Bill of Rights, in the sense that it listed a bunch of rights that all people in England, all people who were part of England, had. That included the right to due process, it included the right to vote, it included, interestingly, the right to own a gun. It was a list of rights that all people had, meaning that the king could not take away your rights. So it's yet another example of a limit on the power of the king by listing rights that everyone had and that the king and parliament could not take away. Okay? So, again, shrinking the power of the king even more. Okay? Then we have the Mayflower Compact. So the Mayflower Compact, as we learned, was an agreement between the pilgrims as they traveled to the New World, what we now call the United States. They were, 2,000 miles away from the king. They very well couldn't expect that the king and parliament was going to be able to make all of their decisions for them. So they agreed to make all the rules and decisions for themselves in the New World, that to do so they would all gather and they would vote on all of the issues. Now, we said this is obviously a direct democracy because it involves the pilgrims voting for themselves. We also said this is an example of an oligarchy because the women were not allowed to participate, and obviously children were not allowed to participate either. So this is an example where really there's only a few people that could participate. But nevertheless, it was a direct democracy. It is an example of self-government because the pilgrims took the responsibility for themselves and they ran with it. Even though they were 2,000 miles away from the king, they were going to be in charge of themselves and make decisions for themselves. Finally, we learned that Common Sense was a pamphlet written by Thomas Paine, or T-Paine, that we said in class. And T-Paine's whole pamphlet here was basically saying, look, it's common sense, we should be independent. The king is 2,000 miles away. We've gotten used to taking care of ourselves. The king is taxing us, doing all these things that we don't like, and because of that, we should fight for our independence. We should be independent, be free, and be able to govern ourselves as our own country. So, to review, Magna Carta limits the power of the king a little bit. English Bill of Rights limits the power of the king further. The Mayflower Compact is about the pilgrims governing themselves. Common Sense is about, we should be independent. We should be free. Okay, so those are your important documents. Good luck.